who does not have a family member or someone they love or care about, a friend who does not have a friend who is MAGA? Most of you don't. She chooses her friends carefully. Most of us obviously do. We have loved ones, people we care about, and it's very, very difficult to talk about them. And we have brought to you today, I think it's just Rich, but I'm not 100% sure because that's the way today is going. Rich Logis, he has seen the light and started an organization called Leaving MAGA. I'm not going to have to tell you much about it because you read on our brochure or on our flyer what he's going to talk about. So, Rich, we appreciate your being here so much today, and thank you, and thank you all for being here. And I'm just going to turn this presentation over with a prayer that we will be able to see and hear Rich Logis today. Thank you.
Hey, everybody. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you so much for having me. And thank you in particular to Donna for her persistence and follow-up. So as is customary, before I speak with any group, I would like to first apologize for my past MAGA activism. I helped the president divide the country. I was culpable in tearing asunder relationships and friendships and families and places of worship, communities, households. As a result of my time in MAGA, I amplified conspiracy theories that resulted in the suffering and trauma of others. And so for that, I want to say I'm sorry. If I had met all of you when I was in MAGA, I would have deemed all of you to be existential threats to my life, my livelihood, my family, and my country. And for that, I'm sorry. You did not deserve to be spoken of that way. So in 2015 and 16, I was someone whom I considered myself to be very politically lonely. I believed that the two parties were the same. I felt that they only represented a small sliver of the country, the wealthy and the powerful. And when Donald Trump came along, even though I was curious about his campaign at first, what was enticing was that he ran as an actual outsider. Even though he ran as a Republican, he had no military, no government, no political experience. And he seemed willing and able to significantly disrupt the established political order and the status quo. And over time, I found myself nodding in agreement more and more with him. And it was in early 2016 when I went from Trump curious to actually working on the campaign as a grassroots volunteer. I did phone banking. I showed people where to get registered. I recruited people to vote for Trump. I even contributed part of the call script for the campaign. And even though there were others who may have done more volunteer work than I did, there were none who did it as devoutly and fervently as I did. And after the 2016 election, when we were vindicated and validated, I got deeper and deeper into the MAGA world. I didn't walk away and tell everyone I met, see you in 4 years. I became a MAGA pundit. I aspired to get the attention of the president and become a MAGA influencer. I wrote dozens and dozens of freelance articles for a number of MAGA-friendly media. I had bylines in places like Fox and The Federalist and WorldNet Daily, which is the site that originated the Obama birther conspiracy. I professionally produced my own podcast. I produced dozens and dozens and dozens of episodes that were so very much devout to the MAGA movement. And what I found in MAGA, which is what, for those of you who have friends and family have found as well, is I found a political community. I found a place that offered me a sense of gathering and a sense of belonging. And it was a sense of belonging and gathering that I had never had before Trump came along and before MAGA became the dominant political force that it has become. So I did that for many, many years as a very dedicated MAGA soldier. I believe that I was a real American who was on the right side of history, and everybody against us, they were on the wrong side of history and they were fake Americans. I can even give you certain specific examples about some of the anti-Semitism that exists within MAGA, even though a lot of adherents don't realize it. Something we used to say all the time in MAGA was any Jew who voted Democratic was not a real Jew, and any Christian who voted Democratic was not a real Christian. This was the kind of rhetoric that we trafficked in all the time. And if anyone was not 100% with us, they were 100% against us. And it didn't matter whether they were Democrats or liberals or progressives or Republicans or conservatives. If someone was not 100% with us, they were 100% against us. And I lived that way year after year after year. And MAGA was exhilarating, and it was enthralling, and it was exciting, and it was new, and it was novel, and it was unprecedented. And it was a community for me. But it was all of that until it wasn't. And I like to paraphrase the late venerable Ernest Hemingway in saying that my political epiphany happened gradually and then suddenly all at once. There were many cracks that eventually led me to leave MAGA. Trump's mismanagement of the pandemic, January 6th, the stolen election lies. These were not enough for me to leave, but they did start to form some of my doubts. There were a couple of turning point moments that eventually led to my departure of MAGA. The first was actually not Donald Trump. It was my governor, Ron DeSantis. I've been in Florida for many years. And in the summer of 2021, Ron DeSantis platformed COVID anti-vaxxers at his press conferences, who talked about the COVID vaccine changing people's RNA and that the COVID vaccine was deadlier than the virus itself. And if we recall, in the summer of 2021, the Delta surge was pervasive across the country, and children were getting sick and children were dying. And I, as a parent of two children, would read story after story about parents whose children had befallen ill. So when Ron DeSantis did that, it really confused me, and I didn't understand why he was giving a platform to anti-vaxxers. And it was after that happened that I did something that sounds very, very simple, but was very profoundly life-altering and changing for me, which was I diversified my news and information sources. And when I did that, I started to slowly realize over the course of the next year that so much of what it was that I believed was false and inaccurate. Democrats weren't, for example, coming for our guns. Liberals were not indoctrinating children into transgender Marxism in our public schools. Progressives were not trying to replace white people by importing brown people and foreigners. These kinds of beliefs are what I sincerely held, and it's what I thought for years. So I came to this liberating but painful realization that years and years of lies had shaped my identity, my being, and my personhood. And there was one final straw for me that eventually led to my leaving of MAGA, and that was on May 24th, 2022, which was the Uvalde, Texas school shooting. On that day, I remember thinking that Donald Trump and the Republican Party were going to respond to Uvalde the same way that they always did to every mass shooting, by giving an acceptance of avoidable deaths and suffering. And it was shortly thereafter Uvalde that I decided to quietly leave MAGA. But there was something that was really gnawing at me because I had always been very unapologetically public in my support for Trump. I felt that I needed to be unapologetically public in my renunciation of MAGA. And so it was on August 30th of 2022 when I wrote a mea culpa. And I said in that story that I was sorry for supporting Trump and MAGA, and that I wanted to apologize to anyone I may have hurt with my words, deeds, and rhetoric. So I call that date, August 30th, 2022, my leaving MAGA-versary. And the God's honest truth, folks, is that when I wrote that story and I published that apology, I never thought that anybody would care. I did it because cathartically, I wanted to close that chapter of my life. I had no regrets whatsoever about leaving MAGA, but it was still scary for me to do it for a couple of reasons. The first was I knew that leaving meant that I was going to walk away from my MAGA second family. There are people I had grown very, very close with. And as embarrassed as I am to admit this, sometimes that second family took precedence over my own blood family. And I neglected at times my parental, familial, and husband duties in my home because of my MAGA activism. And the other reason that made it so scary to leave was that I had to accept that I had believed years worth of lies and that I had created a public persona based on those lies and that I had advocated for them. So when I wrote that story and I thought that no one would care, I instantaneously discovered that people did care. And I received messages one after the other from friends and family of those in MAGA who reached out to me desperately, trying to figure out ways how to rejuvenate the relationships that they had with their close ones who were in MAGA, relationships that had been strained, relationships that had been adversely affected because of my activism. So I spent the next year recounting my story to anyone who would hear it. I had media, I had organizations come to me, ask me to tell this story of mine. And born from telling that story was our organization, Leaving MAGA. And we're now in our second year. We are a new community for people who leave. We are a community for people who have doubts about their support for Trump and MAGA. And we're also a place for friends and family where we try to work toward reconciliation between friends and family and their MAGA identified close ones. And I want to offer what I hope will be some valuable tips. I call them our don'ts and do's for how to talk to your friends and family, not just with the holidays coming up, but even beyond that going forward. So if I may, I'd like to get right into it. The first don't that I would like to bring up is...
Rich, for just a second.
Sure.
I don't have this handout, so we need to get them the handout. Well, you can just okay, good. Okay, just want to let you know, and everybody's got one here. Most everybody does. So okay, thanks. Sorry.
Sure, not a problem. We'll start with some of the don'ts. Now, the first don't is I encourage people to avoid leaning heavily on biography, credentials, and expertise. Now, it is true that because of experts, our world and our country has been made better, healthier, and wealthier because of experts. But the fact is, pervasive across MAGA, there is an anti-science, anti-education, and anti-intellectualism within the community. When I was in MAGA, any information that even remotely refuted the pervasively held beliefs, it was shunned. It was kept out. That's why when I diversified my news and information sources, I steadily started to I started to move out of the right-wing media echo chamber and started to incorporate non-right-wing sources. So leaning heavily on expertise, it's going to backfire because people in MAGA are skeptical of experts. And I'm not here to litigate that experts are not always right. I understand that. I think we all can agree that experts are not always correct, but experts are viewed skeptically within MAGA. So that's the first don't that I would say to start off with. Another don't is not to attack, question intelligence, or impugn anyone's integrity. Sometimes we do this without really knowing it, when we might ask someone, how could you believe that? And we don't want to cast aspersions on anyone's intellect, even though there is an anti-intellectualism within MAGA. So we want to avoid that. We want to make sure that people don't feel condescended upon. And there's something that is actually remarkable. If a pro-MAGA person and an anti-MAGA person speak long enough, they might discover that there's actually agreement on some issues, and we'll get to that in a moment. Another don't is not to criticize other MAGA community members, because critiques will be taken personally. I'll give you a quick story about this. I was at an event earlier this year, not a Trump-friendly event, but there was a lady there who came to me and she said, my Trump-supporting husband is here. I convinced him to come with me. And so I told her, I said, well, I want to meet him. Bring him over. I had an exhibitor table at this event. So he came over and his name was George. And I said, George, I want you to know, I don't think that you're a racist and a homophobe and a misogynist and a xenophobe. And he said to me, he said, okay, Rich, and I want you to know, I don't think that you're a socialist pinko commie. So we had a little bit of a laugh about this. And he said something to me that was so influential that I made it as part of our don'ts. He said to me that when he hears insults levied against other Trump supporters, that he takes it personal. And if George feels that way, I know that there are others who might feel that way as well. And I know that there's this mythology within MAGA about blank your feelings. I'm not going to say we're going to keep it G-rated today at breakfast, but there's this blank your feelings. But the reality, folks, is that people in MAGA are just as emotional as anybody else. And MAGA is, for all of the mythologies of rugged individualism within MAGA, the fact is that MAGA is really a wholly conformist community. But having said that, it is best to refrain from lobbing any kind of invective or insults toward Trump supporters, because others will take it personal. Another don't, and I've done this one also, so I imagine that we all have to some extent, don't debate facts and policies. No, let me clarify. Very few people actually make decisions based on facts and policy. Most people make decisions on emotions and perceptions, and that is exactly how people in MAGA make decisions as well. So debates about facts and policy, all it does is it just erects bulwarks and defenses between you and your MAGA identified close one. And we've all done it. I know that I've done it. And it's why no matter how many facts are offered, it doesn't move the needle with our MAGA identified friends and family. And then one other don't that I would offer is don't try to change the other person's mind or bait them into an argument. I want to just say something on this point and broadly speaking about these don'ts and do's, folks. First off, it is not your responsibility to coddle anybody in MAGA. And if there's ever a time that you are on the receiving end of abuse, you are under no obligation to receive that abuse. But I cannot emphasize enough that no one can change another person. Only an individual can make a change for themselves. And trying to change another person's mind is just going to make them dig deeper into MAGA. I've seen it. I've experienced it. I know that it's true. And as part of our don'ts and do's, I want you all to know that we've actually applied these in real life situations with great effect. There's a lady who's given a testimonial with us. Her name is Stefania Messina. You can read about her at our website at leavingmaga.org. She utilized these don'ts and these do's with her brother, who was a 2024 MAGA supporter. And she was patient and had many conversations with him, didn't try to change his mind, didn't try to bait him into an argument, didn't bombard him with facts and policies. And just recently, this 2024 MAGA supporter left MAGA. And he realized that so much of his outrage was algorithmically shaped, that the algorithms of the social media and the online sites that he followed were just feeding him dopamine-fueled outrage. Because being in MAGA does have an addictive quality to it. So those are some of the don'ts that I want to offer. Now, there are some do's. And the first do that I would like to reiterate is to try to find some relatability and common ground. Again, if there's a pro and anti-MAGA person who speak long enough, even though they might disagree on some of the solutions, people in MAGA care about what we care about: safety and security and economic opportunity and our children's education. It's just that people in MAGA have had their fears and concerns exploited and manipulated. I said at the DNC last year in a video testimonial that I gave for the Kamala Harris campaign, for which I worked as a co-chair in Florida, I said that Trump's toxic superpower is lying. And all of the lies that have come from Trump and MAGA have made people in MAGA believe that everyone who's not with them pose an existential threat, the same kind of threat that I mentioned at the outset, the way that I would have thought about all of you when I was in MAGA. So the relatability and the common ground is a way of trying to find some spark, some opportunity, some avenue where the temperature can be lowered and people can find an issue or issues that actually result in some kind of productive conversation. So that's our first do. Another do, and this one is one of my favorites. It's try to understand why the MAGA identified person believes what they believe. Now, again, it is not your responsibility to coddle anybody in MAGA. And I think a lot of people have somewhat of a phobia about this do, because when I suggest it, sometimes people might think, well, Rich, why do I need to do that? I'm not the one in MAGA. I don't, why do I need to understand why they believe what they believe? And folks, I want you to know that I'm not asking you to agree, accept, or defend what the MAGA identified person believes. I'm not asking you to compromise your beliefs, your mores, or your morals. But getting to the bottom of why they believe what they believe, one of the benefits of it is it shows us where some of their information sources are. I believe that as much as any other issue, one of our civic crises in America right now is the proliferation of mis and disinformation. I think that mis and disinformation, as much as any other reason, was why Donald Trump got reelected. There are other reasons as well, but I think mis and disinformation was one of the primary reasons, and arguably one might even say it was the primary reason. So getting to the bottom of why someone believes what they believe, it provides and sheds insight into their information sources. And so when you find out from someone why they believe what they believe, you can ask them, where did you hear that? And get to the root source, the origin of the mis and disinformation that they believe. I'm not saying that people in MAGA and that the community is the only information siloed group in the country, but there is no group more information siloed than is MAGA. And I will say that having been in the community for 7 years. Another do that I would like to offer is to open up a respectful back and forth dialogue. And what does that mean? Since Donald Trump was reelected, there's no dearth of reports of people losing their jobs because of cuts, losing grants if they're farmers, agricultural cuts. We see these stories. But one of the ways of opening the respectful back and forth is to avoid statements such as, "I told you so." All this does is cause the person in MAGA to dig in their heels even deeper. And we want to extract people out of MAGA. We want those with doubts who are questioning their beliefs. We want them to come to us. And the goal with these don'ts and do's is that when you decide to re-engage your MAGA identified close one, that you let them know, hey, if there's ever a time that you're doubting your support for Trump and MAGA, I'm a friendly ear. You can come to me and we can talk about it. And I promise you folks that will come as a very pleasant surprise to the person in MAGA. So the respectful back and forth dialogue is a way that you position yourself to be there if they ever start to have their own doubts and their own confusion. And then our last do is, for those of you who might have some strained relationships with your MAGA identified close ones, ask permission to introduce the possibility of reconciliation. I think it's okay if politics is avoided, and I would defer to all of your judgment based on the dynamics of the relationships that you have. But I do these don'ts and do's, and I do this work because I want us actually talking more to each other as opposed to not talking. So the opportunity for reconciliation, which is a very key and core part of the mission statement of Leaving MAGA, I know it's a big ask for me to have you consider that, but if there's going to be reconciliation, it's going to come from all of you. It's going to be led by you, because I see all of you as Leaving MAGA allies when it comes to reconciliation. So these are some of our don'ts and do's. I want all of you to know that I still feel like, even though we've had success with them and we utilize these and we do a lot of our talks based on them, I feel like we're still learning as well. And we're still a work in progress trying to figure these out. So I hope before we get to some questions that these don'ts and do's were helpful, and that they instill in all of you a little bit more confidence to broach some conversations with your friends and family this upcoming holiday season.
Wow. So before we open it up for questions and answers, I just need to tell you this little speaker that we're working on from here is picking up every little piece of information. Somebody's already texted me and said there's a lot of background noise. So we have a tendency, I know, I just want to say, so we have a tendency to talk while other people are talking and rustling a lot of papers and stuff. I just want to ask you to try to keep that down. And one question at a time so that we can make sure that people online can hear clearly. And when we listen to this back, which I know we will, we'll be able to hear it as well. All right. So I want to start with any question. Are you ready, Rich, for some questions?
Can I ask a quick question before we start?
Of course.
If I may. Does everyone feel like maybe they understand a little better what the appeal of MAGA was, given its communal, the community, the sense of gathering, the sense of belonging? My hope is that that comes through, because I believe that most of your friends and family deep down are good people, but there was some void in their lives. There was a void in my life, and it made me susceptible to MAGA. And I believe that being in MAGA in some ways is a cry for help. And I always say that rather than asking what's wrong with you, we ask what happened to you. And I hope that after today and this conversation, that everyone feels like, not that you have to agree, but maybe there's more of an understanding of what the appeal of MAGA really is.
Thank you for that. I think that everybody can kind of agree that we got that. We get that point, Rich. Thank you. I'm sorry you can't see us. We are in a different room. So some of our technology is a little bit different. I'm very thankful we've been able to keep you online with the technology issues that we've had today. One question that I have for you that I think when I first started, when I heard about you, saw you on Adam Kensington and did a little bit more research, is that you make a real distinction between a MAGA, like a core MAGA, hardcore MAGA, and people who support Trump. I mean, can you tell us about that first? Because I think that I have family members that are full support of Trump, but I feel like I only have one MAGA member. So can you help everybody understand the nuances of that?
Sure. And in case anyone can't see, my hat says I left MAGA.
Love your new hat. Love your new hat.
Yeah, and some have said to me that I shouldn't wear a red hat, but I tell them that we need to reclaim red hats. MAGA should not MAGA should not own the branding for a red hat. So it's why we've decided to use this to use the red hat. And when I go to events, it's perfect because people don't realize what it says, and until they look at it, I get all the side eye. So that there's some good news about that question. Most Trump voters are not MAGA supporters. Most Trump voters are either apolitical, independent, or just partisan Republicans who typically vote Republican every election. Now, having said that, there are a lot of people in the MAGA community. And if I had to quantify it, I would base it off of some of the 2024 GOP primary numbers. And there are probably anywhere between, as actual MAGA supporters, 10 and 12 million based on primary numbers. And that's maybe a small percentage of the people who voted for Trump, but it's still a lot of Americans. So we only need to peel away a very small percentage of those millions. But I think someone who's actually a MAGA supporter is a supporter above and beyond just mere partisanship. It's someone who's like me, or like how it was for me, whose life is consumed by their MAGA activism. I will tell you, folks, when I was in MAGA, that forget about taking a day off. I never took an hour off. It was a constant adrenaline fueled fight or flight. And I realized after leaving that what happened in MAGA is I was in these perpetual states of feelings of desperation and panic and rage and despair and paranoia. And that's how I felt being on the winning side. Right? That was as the victorious side. I realized I felt that way. And the reason I felt that way is because I looked at everybody against us as an enemy. And this militaristic mindset was such that you either crushed your enemies first or they crushed you. This is how we thought. So partisan Republicans don't really think that way, but people in MAGA, that mindset does exist. I know that because it existed for me for years.
So I'll pop in a question that I just saw float up, and I know Shelley's gonna be watching the chat probably more closely, but that transitions right into the question about, is MAGA a cult? And what's the difference between a cult and MAGA, if there is a difference?
I understand why people might say MAGA is a cult. I agree that there were some cult-like aspects about it for me. You know, the second family, neglecting familial duties, spending myriad hours in as an activist, spending my own money, having become a parent twice over, money that would have been for my family, but I used it for my MAGA activism. But the reason that I caution against referring to MAGA as a cult is that if we refer to people in MAGA as cultists, what it does is it gives them more reason to stay in MAGA and not leave. And even as hard as it is to walk away from MAGA, it still can be done easier than it would be at what we would identify broadly in a consensus as a cult. There's no, for example, there's no MAGA commune, but there's no question about the devotion that MAGA Americans feel to the cause and to Donald Trump because he's the titular leader of the community. What Trump did is he took right-wing politics that have existed for generations and he branded them and he gave it a moniker of Make America Great Again. For me, I was 39 years old in 2016. Make America Great Again was not nostalgic for me. It was actually very forward facing. It was very progressive. As delusional as it sounds now to hear myself say it, I looked at the 2016 victory as a second kind of founding for America. So I would really caution against referring to MAGA as a cult because I don't think it meets the definition, and it also gives people a reason to dig their heels in even deeper in MAGA. When I was in MAGA and I used to hear the cult talk, all of us used to say, no, we're not in a cult. The outside world is in a cult. And we're not the crazies. The outside world are the crazies. And all that does is create this circuitous loop of everyone calling each other cultists and crazies. So I would ask that everyone please resist the temptation to refer to MAGA as a cult because I don't think it is quite the same as a cult that we could agree upon meets the definition, whether we're talking about Heaven's Gate or People's Temple or Nixium. I don't think that MAGA rises to the level of one of those.
All right, thank you. Other questions? Pat?
Yeah, I have a couple things. First of all, you've taken all the fun out of it, but, and when you first thing, when you say that voting for Trump, can you hear me? I'm sorry, voting for Trump. That's not-
Rich, can you hear her? Hear the question?
Yes, yes, I can hear.
Voting for Trump is, not, voting for MAGA. But I'm not a racist, but if I voted for Nick Fuentes to do something, pretty much tells you that I don't care about it, you know, so anyway, that part. But I just want to know, have you, what kind of positive things have you experienced from using your method? I mean, I think it's great. But do you have a lot of positive experience, or is it just to make yourself feel better? Not you personally, but to make one feel better, or to say, okay, I've done what I can do and I'm moving on. Do you get a lot of positive feedback that you use this method?
I did, thank you for the question. I did mention Stefania, one of our leaders who utilized this methodology with her brother, who was a 2024 MAGA supporter, and he left after many, many conversations that she had with her brother. I also sometimes engage with people who are in MAGA, and what I find in my conversations is that virtually everything that they say is inaccurate. You know, it just it is. I had a conversation recently with someone, and we found common ground though, and the common ground was I told him, his name is Kevin. I said to Kevin that I know that he supports MAGA for what he thinks are the right reasons because he cares about the country. And he said to me, and Rich, you left MAGA because you think that it's what's best for the country, and I think you care about the country as well. So we had agreement. There was concurrence that we both care about the country, but unfortunately, everything else was the entire conversation was just rife with falsehoods. So this methodology, it can work, but it's going to take time for some of the cracks and the fissures that we're seeing. You know, at the outset, we were talking about cracks in the introduction. It's going to take time for some of those cracks and fissures and those chasms to widen. But as they widen, my hope and expectation is that the methodology we have is going to help inch people who are having doubts about MAGA. It's going to inch them further and further away. And if we inch them further and further away and we plant seeds of doubt and we show them not coddling but love and respect and kindness, that ultimately is how people will leave. Because again, folks, I want you to take the pressure off yourselves. You're not going to change your MAGA identified close one. That change has to come from the individual within. But you can arm yourself with this approach that has had real world success for when the time comes when they're starting to even ever so slightly question their belief system. Because I do believe that there are right now, there are many in MAGA who have quietly left. I think there are many who are quietly having doubts, and maybe even some of your own friends and family are having doubts right now. You can establish yourself as a resource for them by letting them know that you could be a friendly ear.
Thank you.
Thank you. Let's take a question from the chat, shall we?
Yeah, Rich, do you just want to answer the questions from the chat, or you want me to read them out?
If you could read them, would be great, please.
Sure. Okay, so Ruth asks, because political affiliation today is such a social identifier, did you find that when you left MAGA, you left your social circle?
Her social circle, his social circle.
When I got deep into the MAGA community, I lost touch with a lot of my longtime friends. And part of the reason I lost touch with them was because many of them were blue voters, and I knew that. And I developed a new set of friends, that MAGA second family whom I had mentioned earlier. And I got close with them. We went to family of gatherings and holiday parties, and our kids knew each other. We would have lunches. There was not a day that would go by that I would not be in touch with some of my fellow MAGA compatriots. And I mean, not a day. It wasn't like we would talk Monday through Friday and then we would take the weekend off. We would talk and message and communicate every single day, year after year after year. So what made leaving, amongst some other reasons, really petrifying was that I knew that I was going to be walking away from this established social circle. And it was a social circle where I found appreciation and respect and vindication and validation. I had people who would read my articles, who would talk about my podcasts. I had one close friend who had a Trump group. We would meet every month. I was a sponsor. I was a donor. I would speak at the events. I was writing an anti-democratic party book. Leaving meant that I was walking away from all of that. And I say all of this because for your MAGA identified close ones, for them to leave, it's going to be frightening for them as well because they're going to walk away from their own social circle. And it is not easy to do that. But with leaving MAGA, we highlight these stories we do, not because we can make it easy, but I hope that we can make it a little bit easier through our storytelling, that people who are ready to transition out of MAGA to have their own transformation, to become what I call a born-again human being, that we can show them a pathway through our storytelling and through all of the leaders who have given witness to their own MAGA experiences with us.
Thank you. And that actually leads into the next question. What do you see as the role of Christian nationalism and MAGA?
You know, the same lady, Stefania, the one whose brother left, who utilized our methodology, her entree into MAGA was actually through her Christian nationalist church. And there's no question that Christian nationalism is very much a part of the ethos of the MAGA community. And, you know, the lady had mentioned Nick Fuentes. Nick Fuentes is someone who has a bigger following and more influence than do most Republican politicians. And when I was in MAGA, it was a fantasy of ours to kill off the GOP and make it a MAGA party. And I think it's accurate to say that that has been achieved and has been accomplished. So with Christian nationalism, what it's resulted in are people who profess to be Christians, and I'm not questioning their faith or their Christianity, but what they've done is they've used their Christian faith to justify everything that Donald Trump does. And I, as a Catholic, and of course I like to joke, my wife hates this joke, but as I joke that I'm an excommunicated Catholic, but as someone who was raised Catholic and was raised with Christian values, what Donald Trump is doing does not reflect Christian values. But Christian nationalism is simultaneously a religious and political force, and there's no doubt that it's got a grasp and a hold on MAGA right now.
Okay, thank you.
Let's take a question in the room.
We've got a couple more questions here on Zoom.
I know, I thought we were gonna alternate for fairness.
You want to alternate? Okay, sure.
Okay, I obviously am on the left side of things. MAGA would probably say my data, my facts are wrong. As I would say, the MAGA is wrong. would it be insulting if I were to talk to somebody and say, I honestly, seriously, I try to watch Fox News maybe 15 minutes a day. I can't get through it, but I try. Would it insult a MAGA person if I said, would you try just 15 minutes, watch the 5:30 news on ABC, NBC, or CBS? Would that insult them?
I don't think so. In fact, that's actually quite a good idea, and I have a phrase for it. I call it information bartering. And what that is someone takes one information source. So one person has an information source, the other person has a source of info, and they both agree that they will share it with each other. So your information barter would be that you'll watch Fox News for a certain period of time if the MAGA identified person will watch some other news source. I don't think it will be an insult. And in fact, you might even be pleasantly surprised that they might agree to it. I've tried to do information bartering with people in MAGA. A lot of times I've failed. I've not gotten them to agree. But I know that it's worked because some of our leaders have done it. And what it does is it again gets to the source origin of the mis and disinformation. So I would absolutely encourage you to do that. I think it's a great idea, and maybe it could be relayed back to me somehow through Donna if you do it and the MAGA identified person agrees to it, because I would like to know what the outcome of that is.
Okay, thank you. I think it's Zoom question.
Okay, the next question, do you do any work to counter the prevalence of turning point among young people?
Can't hear. Rich, can you repeat the question?
Can you hear me?
Yes,
Okay, I can hear you.
Okay, sorry. Do you do any work to counter the prevalence of turning point among young people?
So we are in the process as an organization of developing what we hope will be in-person events. And some of those in-person events, we are looking to hold them at colleges and universities next year. And what those events would be, they would be days of storytelling where we would have some of our leaders tell their stories about their own MAGA odyssey. Because I think that our young people right now, they feel for some understandable reasons, they feel very disillusioned and disenchanted. And if they feel that way, then it means that right-wing politics, it has an advantage. And that's why young people shifted rightward in this election, because it was right-wing influencers who got in front of young people. We have to counter that. And the way you counter it is you go to young people where they are. And that means going to colleges and universities. It also means going to online sources, to the media that they consume. That's what the Republican Party did very, very well. MAGA did that very well. And we need to follow that playbook, because that playbook can work. And we have to give young people a reason. We have to give them a reason to not solely look at right-wing politics, because if there's no alternative to the right wing, then the young people are going to support it. And it's the election shows that they supported it because it was in front of our young people.
All right, thank you. Happy? You wanna go back over there?
Thank you very much for sharing your personal story. I mean, I think it meant a lot to a lot of people here. You spoke about the cracks that you experienced, of the issues that were the cracks for you that led to the break. Do you see, are those common issues to others who have left MAGA that you're working with? What are the common fissures? Because I think that would be really helpful to know what issues are, you know, where people are more open to hearing information or.
So for some of our leaders, a couple of the reasons that led them to leave MAGA range from similar to my story, the president's mismanagement of the pandemic, January 6th, inhumane treatment of immigrants. I think right now, if we look at some of the cracks, there's no question that the Epstein story I believe, is causing a lot of people in MAGA to wonder aloud why Trump has been so resistant to releasing these files. And I think that there's a burgeoning cognitive dissonance across MAGA because people in MAGA are starting to wonder if Trump is in fact lying about Epstein, then what else is it that he might be lying about? What else, if he's dishonest about this Epstein story, what else might he be dishonest about? For me, even though COVID and January 6th and the stolen election lies weren't enough, they still did form some of the early cracks. Regarding January 6th, I'm a little embarrassed to admit this, but I always feel it's best to be transparent in the way I tell my story. I didn't support what happened on January 6th. I didn't go there. I never thought that the election was stolen. I didn't think that Joe Biden won by fraud. But when January 6th happened, what bothered me about that day wasn't the violence and the fact that law enforcement was attacked and there was a woman, Ashley Babbitt, who died. What perturbed me about that day was I looked at everything that happened and I looked at all of the rioters and I told my fellow MAGA compatriots that I was upset that they were harming our chances for a comeback in 2024. So what bothered me wasn't the event itself. What bothered me is that I didn't renounce January 6th for what happened. I was upset about it because of damage control. And I'm ashamed to admit that, but that's how I felt originally about it. It was as I was going through my own year long of doubts, it's when I came to better understand what January 6th really was. I thought groups like QAnon and the Proud Boys and the Oath Keepers, I thought that these were basically hobbyist groups who had no influence and they just inhabited the deep bowels of the internet. But after actually diversifying my news and information sources, I came to understand that they weren't hobbyists, that they actually had influence, and worst of all, they had the blessing of the most powerful person in the history of the world. So January 6th is a key issue for why so many of our leaders left, and it was a core reason for me as well.
Thank you for that. I think Zoom time. Shelley?
Okay. What news sources did you turn to when you sought a broader perspective, and what stimulated that move?
So I am a former journalist. My first job out of college was as a newspaper reporter for a local Gannett-owned newspaper. So USA Today, Gannett-owned local paper. I covered everything except sports. Thankfully, my curiosity never extinguished itself. And after I started to slightly move out of the right-wing media echo chamber, I incorporated daily newspapers into my information sources, our New York Times, our Washington Post, our USA Today's. And I did that digitally because it enabled me to not only read the content of those papers, but I could also read primary sources. And what prompted me to do it was after my governor, Ron DeSantis, had platformed anti-vaxxers. When he did that, it was very confusing to me. It was like I ran face first into a brick wall. I didn't understand why he was doing it. And that was Ron DeSantis doing that was the catalyst for me to expand my information sources and not just consume the right-wing media, which, keep in mind, again, folks, was media that I was also contributing to as a writer and as a podcaster.
So what sources did you turn to? Did I miss it?
I turned to
Sorry.
public, yeah, daily newspapers. I went to traditional daily papers, New York Times, Washington Post, USA Today. I started reading The Atlantic more and more. And
Yeah.
as I did it, as I started to read these sources, I started to slowly realize that so much of what I was afraid of, I shouldn't have been afraid of. So much of what I feared was irrational. It was unreasonable. But when your information sources are solely right wing, you're going to be afraid of essentially everything and everyone. And that's how I lived for many, many years. I lived in fear that there was a Democrat or a liberal or a progressive or an anti-Trump Republican behind every tree. That's what happens in information silos. It completely distorts one's worldview and severs one from actual reality.
Thank you. I've told this, I can't remember your name. And I've told her who's next. Thank you.
Hi, in trying to understand MAGA people, regarding the conspiracy theories, my question is, do they believe those or are they just using those to manipulate? And I realize you can't generalize. Would it be accurate to say that some of them do believe that because of brainwashing, but others use it to manipulate? And then beyond that, what is a good news source or factual source to point people to, where they can find the truth of what all these executive orders have caused, for example, so they can understand what's going on, because they don't seem to understand that their family members are losing rights and benefits.
I have to fight my own cynicism on this topic because when I look at MAGA and Republican politicians and influencers, I don't personally think that they believe most of what they say. I don't think Mike Johnson believes most of what he says. I don't think JD Vance does. I don't think Donald Trump believes most of what he says. I don't think MAGA influencers believe a lot of what they say. But their audiences, unfortunately, are traumatized by this content. And my experience in talking with people in MAGA is that they do believe the conspiracies. You know, they do believe that the election was stolen and in 2020. And you know, they do believe that Democrats are importing people illegally. They're importing people illegally to help Democrats seize political power indefinitely. So so the challenge becomes, how do we become a wedge between the influencers, the politicians, and the followers? And I think that's where information bartering, I think it's where asking people, where did you hear that? It gets people thinking about the information sources that they're consuming. And if we can get people in MAGA to look at other sources of information, I want to tell you that that's a win, that's a victory, because doing that enough can create doubt. But I also want to caution that to create that doubt, for people to leave eventually, it takes time. but our loved ones and our close ones are worth it. When I went back to my friends and family whom I had lost touch with after becoming a MAGA soldier, all of them accepted my apology. And in fact, one who was very, very influential in my life dating back to college, he said to me, Rich, I always knew you'd come back. So I say this because I don't want any of you to give up on your MAGA identified friends and family.
So I have 8 minutes till, so we still have time for some questions, right? Or what do you need to do?
I've got one more on Zoom.
Hold on.
No, we're fine.
Okay,
I have questions like everybody else.
right.
So we're not supposed to try to win them over on policy issues. But what about character? The things just in the past week that Trump has done are just, you can't believe that a president of the United States would do the things that he does every single week. I mean, the video of him dumping crap on protesters. I mean, this is not what a president should be doing. My question is, what will MAGA look like? Will MAGA exist without the person of Donald Trump? That question is.
I have what I think is good news.
Yay.
As you know, back to my Catholic upbringing, as the book of Isaiah instructs, bring good news to the afflicted. And the book of Romans instructs us to be patient in affliction. And I think I even though I'm not the most religious Catholic, I cite those two quotes all the time because I think that they complement very well our work. MAGA is not going to go away, but it will unravel after Trump is off the scene. And that comes back to a point I made earlier, which is that Donald Trump took right-wing politics and he branded them. And he branded them Make America Great Again. So he made right-wing politics his own. This is why no one can really supplant him as a MAGA leader. There are people who are going to try to jockey for that position. I don't know if Marjorie Taylor Greene is trying to jockey for that position or if maybe she's having a genuine change of heart. I'm open-minded about it because I know that people can change. So I don't want to assume it's only opportunistic on the part of Marjorie Taylor Greene. But after Trump is gone, MAGA will still be with us, but it is not going to have the strength and the formidability that it has right now. It's not going to have the hold that it will. Now that's good news. There's some bad news to this. Sorry. The bad news is that if MAGA in fact loses its stranglehold, then it means that millions of people are going to be vulnerable to whatever the next iteration of MAGA is. And we have to catch a lot of those people before they get subsumed into the next iteration of whatever the next right-wing politics are. Because once MAGA goes away, for a lot of the people in MAGA, they're still going to have those desires of community and belonging and gathering. And for us, as a Homo sapien species, community is not a want, it's a need. It's part of our existence. And MAGA gives that. It provides that for its adherents. So once MAGA starts to weaken, we have to be positioned to give someone a new sense of community so they don't fall into the trap again of whatever comes after MAGA.
Okay, thank you. One more final question on the Zoom side. I think I.
Yes. Stacy wants to know, it's a question about QAnon. Is it an offshoot of MAGA? Do you know, or what are your thoughts about it?
So we actually, I would encourage everyone to read I would encourage everyone to read all of our testimonials, but there's one in particular. Her name is Erica. So Erica was in QAnon for several years. So much so to the point that there were days that she barely slept because of her devotion to QAnon. QAnon is very much an influence within MAGA. And part of the reason it is because of the conspiratorial belief that there is a deep state and that the deep state is always after Trump and MAGA supporters. So because of that influence, Donald Trump gives voice to QAnon. There are times when he has reposted on his social media QAnon phrases, QAnon content, QAnon imagery. I thought it was a hobby, but I realized that it wasn't. And I now know, and I've known now for several years after having left MAGA, that it is very much a part of the ethos of MAGA. And QAnon doesn't show any signs of weakening. It looks like it continues to remain a force and an influence within MAGA.
Heavy sigh over here. So Rich, I'll close with one question. I think we all, well, we're almost out of time. I think a lot of people in this room probably have this question. I'm tempted to take this video that you did for us today and send it to all of my family members. Would you, to try to influence, well, I'm gonna be honest, try to influence them or try to whatever, you know what I'm trying to say, trying to influence them at the end of the day. That's just being transparent. What are your thoughts about that?
I would support doing that. And let me make a statement for anyone who's in MAGA who hears this. I would like to personally make an appeal to you. If you are having doubts right now, I want you to know that I've been there and that I'm a friendly ear, and our organization is one that you can turn to for guidance. And I don't think that you are a bad person. I think that deep down you are a good person. But I believe that, just like it did for me, I believe that MAGA and Donald Trump have manipulated and exploited our natural fears and concerns. And dehumanizing others is a way that we dehumanize ourselves. And I think that we're better than this. And so for those who are in MAGA who might see this, I want you to know that I understand many of the reasons why you are in the MAGA community, but give some thought to why people left and see if you can envision yourself ever if you can envision yourself ever leaving. So I would be, Donna, I would be perfectly okay with sharing it if you feel comfortable doing it.
Great, thank you so much.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, we're, as part of our strategy at leaving MAGA is getting in front of more people in MAGA. We get in front of, for example, today, I know that I don't need to convince anyone to be against MAGA and Trump, but I hope that I demythologize MAGA a little bit. I show what some of the appeal is, and maybe some of the don'ts and do's can help with conversations and relationships. So I have a focus on friends and family. We do support groups for friends and family every Tuesday night online, which are free and open. There's no financial barrier, and we do those for friends and family to find serenity and healing on how to navigate their friends and family relationships. So the friends and family component, very much instrumental to our work. But we also need to be in front of people who are in MAGA. And right now we have an entire team dedicated to trying to figure out better and more efficient ways to get in front of people who are in the MAGA community, because they need to hear from us. So if anyone who's in MAGA is seeing this, I want them to know that that I relate to them and that we're an organization and I'm a person they can turn to and not have to worry about being judged or being ostracized.
And your website? Tell them your website.
Our website is leavingmaga.org. You can read our testimonials there. We've got media. I know that everybody is inundated with requests for money. We are a nonprofit, so we do operate on donations as well. If anyone feels inclined to be able to donate, we've got some plans coming up for the end of the year. We're going to do we did a mobile billboard several months ago with a message on it outside Mar-a-Lago, and we're looking to do that again for the end of the year. We're also looking at doing an airplane banner that would fly over West Palm Beach. So it wouldn't fly over Mar-a-Lago because it's restricted airspace, but anyone at Mar-a-Lago would see it. So if anyone feels inclined and is able, we do accept donations. We don't usually take any pay for doing events like this. So everyone can read all of our stories, all of our testimonials, connect with us at leavingmaga.org.
Rich, oh my gosh, thank you so much for being with us today.
I hope for everyone that this was helpful.
Say that again?
I hope for everyone that this was helpful and informative.
Very much so. Very helpful. Very, and I know it's so much. I know people have questions. And so,
Thank you very much.
Anyway, thank you so much.
Yeah. I
Oh,
mean,
wait, let me
we can-
clarify one thing. We were gonna have another speaker today. We were gonna have a woman named Madison who was gonna share her story. Should have said this in the beginning. And she had a medical emergency and couldn't make it today. So I knew Rich could carry the entire time. And you did a beautiful job of that. Thank you. We'll say first for Madison. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, I'll let her know. She apologizes for not being able to make it, but I've gotten used to events, so I never envisioned myself as an activist. Even this organization, it happened completely accidentally, and it was unlikely and unintended. It's our second year now, and when I founded the organization, I had to make a decision. Was I going to retire from whatever little public life I'd lived, or was I going to actually try to take my experience and empower others to leave and tell their stories? And thankfully, we chose the latter. We've got a building team, a growing team, very dedicated. And so I never imagined being an activist, but there's an old saying about activism that activism is a life sentence. And I'm, you know, I'm,
By the way, so you're a gift and a blessing to a lot of people, and we thank you so much. Thank you so much.
yeah, it was my pleasure, everyone. And I want to wish everyone a happy Thanksgiving and Christmas as well.
Thank you. Same to you.
Thank you so much.
All right, Rich, we'll see you on Substack and some of these other places.
Connect with us. Please connect with us at any time. My email is on our contact page. And yes, I actually do read my emails for anyone who writes to us.
He does, because he responds.